Welcome to Beyond the Breakwater, where just beyond the crashing waves of fear, discomfort, and doubt lies the greatest potential for life transformation. We want to guide you into the open waters where the calculated risk you take becomes the turning point for you or your organization to thrive. So draw up your anchors and prepare for departure in this week's episode of Beyond the Breakwater. All right, we're back with another episode of Beyond the Breakwater. I'm Lyndsay, and can you guess it? Ed is also here today.
Good to be with you, Lyndsay.
Yeah, we start the same way every time.
That's okay. It's kind of fun.
It is. Somebody brought that up to me. They're like, I know exactly what you're going to say the first few seconds of every single episode. I'm like, all right, there it is. But yeah, we've got another great episode, a lot of great content coming. So far, we've been talking a lot about business-related things, it seems, like a lot of models that churches haven't necessarily had the language of before. And we've also been covering a lot of things of what it looks like to do ministry biblically as Jesus did them. And so I think in the world around us today, we don't really blend the two of those very well, business and church. So Ed, can you talk about that? Like, why are we blending the two?
Yeah, Lyndsay, let's start out and talk about how this conversation is going to push us beyond the breakwater. Just the conversation in and of itself, because there's such controversy. I mean, it's really interesting, even in our church. I mean, it's just amazing how many people are like, you got to run this like a business, and others is like, this isn't a business, this is a ministry, this is the church, don't run it like a business. And I think if you put 10 people in a room, they would be divided on, how do you run the church? Do you run it more like a church? Do you run it more like a ministry? Is it both and?
Yeah.
Because I think if you're all ministry and you don't have any business principles on it, it's probably not going to last very long. So what we do, especially with our community ministries, we talk a lot about entrepreneurial ministry, and it's a teeter-totter. And I would tell you, every day in every one of our ministries, we are trying to balance the entrepreneur ministry. And we can apply this to the church, but it might be easier to first apply it in a community ministry because it's much more straightforward.
What do you mean by community ministry?
Well, we've got a number of community ministries. One of them might be like our appliance store. We call it Pivot Point Appliance. And what we do is people give us appliances, like when they upgrade their appliances, they give us a donated appliance. And we have people that have barriers to employment. They fix them up. And then we sell them. We've talked a lot about the Alice population. About 95% of the sales go to people that are in Alice between 30,000 and 72,000. But appliances in particular are everybody up through 72,000. And they come in, and instead of buying a washer for, say, $800, they might buy a washer for $150. That's been completely refurbished. So maybe an example of what I mean by entrepreneur ministry is that sometimes people come in and they don't have it. I mean, they just don't have $150. They might have $50 or $60 that they can put towards it. So we want to care for them, and we want to help them out. And so maybe we'll sell a washer for $60. But that means that we're short $90 to $100 to pay our bills. So it's really easy in a ministry to say, oh, we're here about helping people. So you keep helping people. And what happens is you're running out of money. But then you got to go back and say, all right, how do we put some business principles in so that we can make sure that the dollars are there so that we can make payroll. At the same time, are we in a place that we can do the ministry? And boy, those things, I mean, all we have to do is look every month, at what we call a profit and loss statement, a P&L statement. And you can see, wow, you guys were really heavy in ministry because your numbers are in the red. And it's just like, you can't sustain this. So what do we maybe need to do to raise the other side of that? So there's that teeter-totter. When your numbers look better, are you doing as much ministry as you could? When your numbers are looking worse, maybe you're doing more ministry and you're not using, I don't want to say we're not using good principles, but you've got the principles there, but ministry is just demanding that you're helping more people.
And it's probably pretty unpredictable. So that's where the business side of things might hit a pause, and ministry is happening. Ministry is happening in the interruptions, in the day of being present with someone and not just being on the agenda for things, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You know, I was there was a time, a few months that I was running Pivot Point, and I just remember, you know, a mom coming in, and she said, "My kids have been taken away, and I'm at the final stage that they want to give me my kids back. The problem is that I need a refrigerator, and without a refrigerator, I can't keep food cold, and so." The authorities were like, "We can't let you have your kids back unless you have a working refrigerator." So she came to us, and she said, "I'm so desperate for a refrigerator because I can get my kids back today." And I'm like, "All right, well, how much do you have towards it?" You know, I can put $25 towards it. That's all I have. And I said, "Perfect, sold." You know, so we lost $125, $150 on that refrigerator.
Wow. But that was the cost of ministry.
Yes, that
And
was the right cost of ministry. That was the right thing to do for her.
And if I'm hearing you right, between all of these entrepreneurial or community ministries, what they are is they're creating an intersection for the church in the community to meet more people that would never have walked through the doors of a church otherwise.
Yes, we might even call that the marketplace church. And I know that's another one of those things like people are like, "What do you mean the marketplace church?" It's the church moving into the marketplace. It's the church moving into the community where the church can make the greatest impact. Because you're right on. The day when people are going to come to your church and walk into the church looking for something that the church offers is very slim. Maybe if somebody invites them, they might come, but they're probably coming for community. They're coming to maybe explore more about God, or maybe they were part of another church and they got invited to your church, so they traded churches and went to a new church. But it's rare. I say rare in most churches that the church gets to impact something going on in the community.
So let's talk about the cost of ministry. We mentioned that there is going to be some type of cost affiliated with it tangibly. It's going to cost dollars to run.
Yes.
So historically, what that has looked like for us, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it has taken some donor dollars. It's taken some amount of income to sustain these ministries. So can you talk about where that funding has come from?
Yeah, they're all different. I think we're sitting in a really unique place because even as you're talking, you know, I'm thinking about, you know, each one of the ministries, and they were all started differently. Some was seed money. We needed seed money to start. Like we needed seed money for the garage. We needed a space, and so we needed seed money to build the garage, and then to get the lifts for it and get the equipment for it. We needed food for the Bridge Food Center. And we didn't have any money for food. The church was in a lot of debt at this point. And so you have different funding models. And so one of them is we went into the community, into foundations, and said, "Hey, would you like to help us with a garage? It's a big dream." And other ones are like, we went before the church with a grocery cart full of food and said, "Would you like to buy a pallet of corn for $1,700 or a pallet of toilet paper for $300. So different fundings, different strategies. Pivot Point, our appliance store, actually didn't cost us $1. That was probably the most interesting one because it was started by another organization, and I caught wind of it the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, that on Tuesday the doors were going to be locked permanently, so like 5 days later. And I was like, "What do you mean they're closing it permanently? It was just started. I mean, it just had about a 3-month run and they were closing it." So I went to the organization who had started it with a grant and I said, "Can I have it?" And they laughed at me. They're like, "What do you mean? Well, you're going to close it, right?" "Yeah." "Can I have it?" And they were like, "Sure." Okay. So we just took it over. And on Tuesday, we just took over all the salaries and we started it, and we already had a running business. And then we just really started impacting the ministry aspect of this. What does this look like?
Yeah. So I think I've heard you talk a lot about like the multiplication of dollars, and we've kind of talked about like this is God's math. Like to us, it's like, all right, we get something for $2, and the value of that $2 is $2. But from all of these ministries starting, it's just incredible to see like, okay, this is how much we brought in, but somewhere along the way it exploded and I don't understand what happened. So can you talk about like the multiplication effect?
Yeah. Let's start with some really basic things. I mean, I think as a donor, when a donor gives to somebody, and we can be donors. It doesn't matter. Anybody who gives a gift to anybody. Typically, if you give a gift, let's say you give a gift of $100, you know it's probably going to get consumed. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter where you give it. If you give it to your church, it's used in salaries and utilities and expenses. You give it to a nonprofit organization, they use it for salaries and the running of the place, and maybe some of the money goes to help somebody. You give to Compassion International. You send $38 and it's gone. That's a normal. Mm-hmm. Somewhere along the way, we started to learn a concept of multiplication. And I think once you start to get your arms around a multiplication process, it changes you. You start to look at everything from a multiplication standpoint. And if you're like, well, I don't understand what you mean, Ed. What do you mean by multiplication?
Yeah, I don't.
Well, okay, so here be an example. Like when we went before the church and we asked for a pallet of corn for $1,700, I was telling them that we could take their $1,700 gift and multiply it times 100. And they were, I mean, honestly, they looked at me like, okay, you're goofy. Mm-hmm. You can't do that. That's impossible. And I said, no, it's not hard. If you give me $1,700 and I sell the corn for 5 cents over what we pay for it, how much money do I have? I mean, let's say I get a pallet of corn, $1,700. Mm-hmm. I sell the whole thing. Mm-hmm. I have my $1,700 back, plus a nickel. But the nickel, the reason why we charge 5 cents extra, that goes for credit card fees. Mm-hmm.
So basically, that's kind of irrelevant,
it's a
right?
wash.
It's just, yeah, so you break even.
Yeah, so the nickel doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's really, we're breaking even. Mm-hmm. So when I said to the donor, if you give me $1,700, I'll multiply it. Because now when I take the pallet of corn and I sell it, I have $1,700. I buy another pallet. Then I sell it and I have $1,700. So one gift.
It's recycling it almost.
Yes, that's a good way to say it. Where I just keep using it over and over and over. And so 7.5 years ago, we started the bridge, and I went into the church and I went into the community and I explained this concept. And I have never seen this in my life. Don't think that we're like this great big wealthy church, because we're not. But when you get people excited about food in a community, that if they give a gift, it's never going to run out. I mean, think about, for every $1,000 gift, we turn it into $100,000. Well, in about 4 weeks, we raised $60,000, which I have never seen in my life for anything. So now we have $60,000 and we bought food.
So how did that happen? How did you raise the $60,000?
Well, I went before the church with a grocery cart, and I picked up a can of corn. And I said, hey, folks, how would you like to buy a can of corn? $1,700. I took a toilet paper. How would you like to buy a pallet of toilet paper? $300 or $350, whatever it was. And I said, if you get together with other families, maybe 2, 3, 4 families can buy a pallet of something. And then we went out into this lobby area, and I put all of the items. I had a second one of every item out with how much it cost. And I think I shared this before, Lyndsay. I've never seen this before, but 4 people across, 4 people deep, everybody had their checkbooks open, and they would look at all of the items on the counter, think about their budget, and they'd say, I'd like to make, I don't want to buy a pallet of, corn. I want to buy a pallet of beans. I want to buy a pallet of toilet paper. And $60,000 was raised. Okay, no, 7 years later, we have been recycling that money to the tune of, like this year, our little bridge store. I mean, if you saw it, it's a little bread store.
So little, yeah.
It's a little bread store.
It started out literally with pallets of just stacked food on it.
50 pallets.
Yeah.
We sold 50 pallets of food, okay? So $60,000 of food. Well, this year we're on track to sell $382,000 of food. Okay, so I want you to just...
How many years later was this?
This is 7 years later.
7 years later, okay.
So think about the math. Every year... we're going from $60,000 of food, because what everybody needs to understand is that I still have the $60,000. It's never run out. We just keep recycling it, as you say. Mm-hmm. Except now, instead of having 50 items, we have 1,500 items. Mm-hmm. So instead of buying it by the pallet, now we buy it by the case. Maybe we'll buy 4 cases of corn to replace the corn. And we keep adding. So now, take $60,000, and we're going to have $382,000 in sales from this teeny tiny little store that's only open 4 days a week, all volunteer run. So that means every year we're actually multiplying $60,000 times 6, a little over 6. And we've done that for 7 years. So 6 times 7 is 42 times. And so we've actually taken $60,000 and we've used it 40 times.
Okay.
And we still have the money.
I'm going to be honest with you. I am getting lost at the multiplication piece.
Okay.
Like,
Well,
I'm not
that's what this is about.
understanding how the $60,000 grows to like the 300.
Yeah.
Like, would that mean that more people would be donating money? And so that like
No.
seed money is just growing?
No, nobody's given us more money for food.
Okay.
So we started with $60,000, right? And then let's say we sold $60,000 of food. Now I still have $60,000. So I bought $60,000 more. So now I'm at $120,000
Okay.
of food sales. And then we sell the $60,000 and we buy food again. Now I'm at $180,000. Then we sell the food and now we're at $240,000. So I
Okay.
took the same dollars and then we used it over and over and over. So the $60,000 that was given, we multiplied it 40 times.
That's incredible. This is
Yeah.
the first time I've understood this, to be clear.
Okay.
I know we've talked about this so many times, but it is incredible, this process. And when I think of like what other ministry models are having an example of how they're doing things, it's like they have the $60,000 worth of food and they give it away. They're out of money and they
gone.
start over again.
Then they have to raise $60,000 more.
Yeah. So this is amazing
Yes.
that it's just become something so self-sustaining.
Yes.
And it is at the cost of affordability too for those who are shopping to know
Correct.
that like we're selling things for the exact price we paid for them, but then the nickel over to cover the credit card fees.
See, you said you finally got it.
Yeah.
Okay, here's the really good about that. This is why we're having this podcast, because so many people, when I share this, they're like, I don't get it. I don't get it. They keep telling, I don't get it, Ed. I don't get it. But once they get it, they're like, oh my goodness, that's incredible. How did you do that? And it makes you think differently. So see, we took $60,000 and so far we've turned it in over about $2 million.
Wow.
That's the multiplication of the same $60,000 over and over and over and over again. Okay. So now, just a little side note, we actually purchased the building after 7 years, and we're actually, the little bridge is growing up about 5 to 6 times bigger. So now I just came from a meeting this morning, and the leader of that ministry said, because we're moving into a facility that's 5 times bigger than what we have, we're going to need a little bit more food. And I said, all right, what do you think? And she said, I think we're going to have to raise about $50,000 more food. I'm like, okay. She goes, any ideas for how we might do that? I said, why don't we get another grocery cart?
Been there, done that.
Been there, done that. That was 7.5 years ago. Maybe we want to go in to the church and say, folks, we need more. We took $60,000 and turned it into $2 million. Imagine if we have $110,000 of food and we multiply 40 times, that's over $4 million of food over 7 years. So it's the concept. When you start to understand the concept of taking the little and changing how you do it and multiplying it, it has this unbelievable effect. Okay, let's bring it down to some really simple things.
Okay.
So the church uses credit cards for the staff, and there was a time, we don't have it anymore, but we used to get gas cards. Like, we would use the credit cards, and they would say, would you like to exchange that for points? We changed it for points. We got gas cards. So we would get about $1,000 of gas cards at $25 increments. Okay, so we would have 40 gas cards. Now, we can take those gas cards and give them away. Then how much do we have at the end of that?
Nothing.
It's all gone. That's consuming. That's not multiplying. That's not math. That's just, I gave you 40 gas cards. You gave them all away. Now you have nothing. And then here's what we also noticed. We didn't anticipate this, that when we have gas cards, people would come in off the street and say, I heard you have a gas card. I want a gas card. And boy, I tell you what, if you didn't give them a gas card, They would get so angry. They would be swearing at our office people because the office person was standing in the way of somebody who wants a gas card, and she had gas cards. And they'd be like, well, I want 2, I want 3, and they would come with their friends and say, give one to all of us. And it was horrible. I mean, it was just absolutely horrible. So we're like, we got to change this. This is not working. This is that. Like, I don't.
It's like what you're giving me is not enough.
Not enough.
It will never be enough.
No.
Yeah.
And can I come every day?
I've seen those encounters before.
And then people were coming more often, and we only had 40. So when they were gone, they were gone. So we said, let's try something different. So we started to charge $10 for a $25 gas card. You'd be surprised at the impact it had on people. First of all, people would be like, what? I'm not paying for a gas card. This is a scam, No, you're getting $15 free, but you got to pay $10. You got to give something. But this is what we were after. We were after the multiplying effect. So we started out with $1,000 of gas cards. We had 40 gas cards, and we sold them for $10. So 40 people got a gas card of $15 of value. Okay, that's a lot of gas. We took the money that we got from the gas cards, which is now $400, and we bought 16 more gas cards. Then we took the money from that, and we bought 6 more gas cards. Then we bought 2 more gas cards. Then we bought 1 more gas card. Now, I don't know if you're following the math here. But if you sell 40 cards for $10 a piece, you have 400. With the $400, you can buy 16 more gas cards for $25. So what we did is we took $1,000 a gas card, and we turned it into $1,625. Just a small multiplication. But that's still a pretty good return. But here was the key. Remember the dignity piece that we always talk about?
Yeah, I want you to go there because I think it's easy to look at this and be like, okay, this is really clever. This is a really clever idea of what you're doing, but why should the church have anything to do with this?
That's right. It can seem on the surface like this is wrong. Somebody needs gas, and you want to sell the gas card. Well, we didn't benefit from the gas card. More people benefit. So when you offer a $25 gas card for somebody for $10, and this is what they will always ask, what are you doing with the $10? We're buying the next person's gas. They're like, what? Your $10 is buying somebody else's gas that really needs it. You're getting a gift of $15. So if you give us a gift of $10, we're going to give you back $15. That's a pretty good return on your investment.
And immediately. Wow. You don't have to wait years for it to do something.
I give you 10 and you give me 15. Yeah. So you just got a 50% return on your money. I know that's like a business principle. So just kind of follow this where people are like, what is the church doing? Because dignity. Now people walk in and they're saying, I don't have my hand out. It's a business deal. When it's a business deal, 2 people are on equal terms. Hey, I have a $25 gas card. I'd like to sell to you for $15. And they're thrilled.
That was the agreement we had.
That was the agreement.
You're good.
All right. Now I want to compare this. So a couple weekends ago, we went to this airplane show. And it was awesome. It was just so fun to, I've got kids and 2 grandkids, and we went, and it was so much fun being out with all the airplanes. While this was going on, a silent auction was going on. There was 4 gift cards for $25. My son was like, I'll give you $40 for it. And then somebody else would come in and put 45. He did 50, 60. Well, my son actually got $100 of gift cards for $70.
Yeah, there it is.
Pretty good return on investment. He gave them 70 and he got 100.
Yeah.
We were walking back to the car. He's like, Dad, I just got $30 free.
Yeah.
He's right. But it cost him $70 to get $30 free. Now, do you think my son was complaining that he had to spend for those gas cards? No.
Absolutely not.
He was like, I can't believe it. I just walked away with $33.
Yeah.
By spending 70.
Yeah.
So I was smiling the whole time, and I'm like, that's dignity. That's dignity right there. He paid for those gift cards, and he got a return, and he got a reward for it. That's what we're trying to create, and that's something that the church can do. The church can create this amazing feeling where, oh my goodness, I just got $15 of free gas for $10. You did.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's helpful or maybe a little bit hurtful, but I hope the listeners will start to go, maybe I'm getting this, that you want to maintain dignity while you want to help somebody, and you want to multiply the dollars so that you can actually help more and more people.
Yeah.
So go back to the gas card. Instead of helping 40 people with gas,
By burning it, just giving it away, you only help 40 people. Yep.
we were able to help 65 people.
Wow.
They got less, but they all walked away with a business deal, and they all felt amazing. So see, that's something that we encourage churches. You want a place to start? If your church has, if you can muster $1,000 from your tithe at the church and say, let's help our community with gas cards, and let's sell them for $10. You get to help 65 people with gas, maintaining dignity, helping them along the way, and then helping them provide for their families.
Yeah, that's really great. So I know we've talked about this in other episodes, but kind of just go here for a second is, can you reflect it based on the model that Jesus had in the Bible? Like, I think some tensions might be coming up of like, Jesus didn't charge for anything.
Yeah, you're right. And this is going to be some tension. And I don't know if we have, say, the best of answers, but when Jesus talked about turning his temple into a marketplace, he had everything bad to say about it. But I want to review, because maybe you know this already, or maybe this is the first time you heard the podcast. But what was going on is that there was a sacrificial system that God had set up, that if you wanted God to forgive you, you would bring in a lamb, a year old, and you would offer it to God as a sacrifice. God would forgive you for all of your sins. That was before Jesus, okay? And it was a forerunner, I just want to say, it was a forerunner to Christ's sacrifice. He was the Lamb of God once and for all, that now we don't need to sacrifice. His sacrifice was the sacrifice of all sacrifices. So prior to that, to get everybody ready for the Lamb of God, Jesus, you would bring a lamb to the temple, you would sacrifice it, and God would smell the pleasing aroma, like a barbecue. You ever walk down the street and smell somebody's cooking out, right? You're like, wow, does that smell good? Well, every time God smelled that, he would say, they're seeking my forgiveness, and God would grant forgiveness for their sins. It was amazing. It was really an incredible thing that God did. So let's just say you lived 150 miles away from the temple, and you're like, if I try to bring my sheep, my lamb, 150 miles, it's going to die getting them here. Then here's what God suggested. Sell it. Bring the proceeds. Buy a lamb so that you can sacrifice it. Great concept. Until you take greedy people who would be right outside the marketplace, even on the temple grounds. And then instead of, let's say you could sell your lamb for $150, and you come and you go, okay, here's my $150 to buy a lamb. Oh, I'm so sorry, it's $300. And you're like, but I don't have $300. I only have $150 from the sale of my offering. Well, I'm so sorry. You can't have a lamb then. And they were profiting off of a sacrificial lamb. And Jesus got so angry because he wanted them to be able to sacrifice, and out of greed, they were basically robbing from God the sacrifice.
Kind of really similar principles that we've been talking about with robbing from somebody when you give to them, and
yes,
there being a dignity transaction
yes.
piece.
When we try to help somebody with a handout, we're actually robbing them of their dignity and saying, hey, I want to be the hero, and I'm going to help you, and I'm going to give you something. Yep. And you're taking something from them, their very dignity, which is their character. You're robbing them before God. And the church should never be robbing people. So the church has to figure out a way to be kind of like this business deal. So if I sell you a $25 gas card for $10, we got a business deal. It maintains your dignity. We were able to help you. We were able to help your family. And you walk away going, isn't this amazing what I just got? And the church made it possible. How cool is that? So see, the church needs to think outside the box, beyond the breakwater. How do I help people, not rob from them, in a way that's going to meet their need? And do you know how many people would come into the church? People from the community that would never walk into the church, and when we advertised, we have these gas cards, they would walk in. And then they always felt good about the church. They would leave proud. Wow, this church really helped me. Really actually helped me.
Yeah, that's amazing. And we never would have met those people otherwise.
We would never have met, and we've met so many doing this. See, once you get the principle of multiplication, you can do it over and over and over. And it's really...
so many intersections.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like a cousin to brokering. And let me just review that, because somebody who would buy shoes, if you bought a pair of shoes for $50 and you sell it to somebody for $5, you're out $45, but that's your offering. And the person who buys it for $5, that's incredible, because they got a great pair of shoes for $5, 10% of what maybe you paid. But when you sell hundreds of pairs of shoes times $5, now you get to go out and buy more shoes so that you get to help more people. Yeah. Or an example of Christmas toys. I mean, imagine, we've talked a little bit about what we do for Christmas, that you take all these Christmas toys. And I was actually talking to a pastor just a couple of days ago. I had lunch with him. And he goes, hey, we heard this great concept. And I said, oh? And he goes, we buy Christmas toys. And I'm like, really? He goes, yeah. And I said, what do you do with them? And he said, well, what we do is whatever the value is that somebody paid for it, we ask them how much they paid for it. We charge the person $25 for those gifts. And I started to smile, because I'm like, wow, what a great idea, And I don't think he realized we've been doing that for years. But they heard about the idea, they grabbed it, and they ran with it. And so now they sell Christmas toys for 25% of the value. Then they take the 25% and they go buy more Christmas toys so that they can help more people.
That's incredible. That's the multiplication.
That's the multiplication right there.
Yeah, that's awesome. So before we wrap up this episode, we've been talking a lot about what to do from like an organizational standpoint, or a larger scale, an entity, organization, the church. But what can the individual listeners do to apply this concept?
The multiplication concept for the individual probably makes it a little bit harder. I think a lot of times I'm going to go back and maybe use it this way. Make the unaffordable affordable. People a lot of times have something to sell. Garage sales, classic. If you do something like a garage sale and you make something that's unaffordable now affordable to somebody, it's not necessarily a multiplication effect, but it's helping somebody at a price that they can afford. When you talk multiplication, especially for the individual, sometimes it's the intangible. So let's just say an individual wants to do something in his church like the gas cards. I would encourage more of that, like get together with others, pull some money as individuals to do something a little bit bigger, something that's going to make a difference. But here's the intangible multiplication. When you help somebody with $15 of gas for $10, I know $15 isn't a lot of gas, or just they only got $5 extra. But what did that person do? That person now could get to work for the week. What's the return on now they had a chance to work instead of I'm out of gas, I can't even get myself to work? What's the intangible? What's the intangible multiplication effect when somebody goes and tells a friend, you know what that church said? I got a gas card for $25 for $10. Wow, that's awesome. How many people did they tell? What's the multiplication effect of when you impact a life in a place of need, that now the individuals are repeating the story? So often when I repeat a story as a pastor and I say, I want to tell you a story about what happened, it's being multiplied. The story is being multiplied for a simple thing like a gas card. And to tell the story about a gas card now gets repeated hundreds of times. We have to stop thinking, oh, this helped one person and I'm an individual and I can only do one person. No, you'd be amazed at how multiplying effect happens in so many areas. We're just not aware of it. So I think I would encourage every listener, always look for opportunities. I mean, I know we've used this example when you're at the grocery store and you see somebody maybe struggling to pay the bill and you offer some money to help pay their bill. You've freed up money for them to do something else. So you've just doubled your money. You gave $20, but now they have $20 that they can use for something else. And you had no idea what else they needed. And they didn't know how they're going to pay for it. And you just helped them pay for that. You have no idea. So you have to trust, take advantage of every time you have a chance to do something, and just think of it like, what's the multiplying effect of this gift? Or is it just going to be consumed? Buy food for somebody, gets consumed.
Yeah. That's great. You've given me a lot to think of. I finally feel like I've understood it after 2 years of hearing about it. And so I'm hoping the listeners are at that same point. I'm going to pick your brain more next week. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Beyond the Breakwater, a podcast of Elevate Community Ministries. Don't let the conversation stop here. You can email us at hello@beyondthebreakwater.org. We would love to chat with you, answer questions, plan a visit, and help you take your next step. We'll see you next week.